Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and issues an amber warning for hot puns and sweaty innuendo. I'm Kevin Day. He is Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. He'll be supplying most of the puns and the innuendo. Kieran, I think we should probably apologise to some of our listeners around the world for the fact that here in Britain it's a news headline when it gets a little bit hotter. There are people around the world listening to this in the middle of forest fires. Yes. And the hottest summer of the year in places like Colorado, where my sister-in-law is. Hello, Fiona. and we're going. It's the lead story on the news. It's a bit hot. it's incredible. And you went cycling this morning for some reason.
Yeah, I did. I did 33 miles wearing my Marmite cycling top. So yeah, it was. It seemed like a good idea when I set off at 8:30, and it didn't seem like a good idea about 3 hours later when I was sweating buckets.
Hang on, is this an actual Marmite cycling top, or is it because you like it and the Baroness doesn't?
No, it's a real Marmite one.
Is it really?
My very good friend Paul got it for me for my 60th birthday, as I am a bit of a Marmite obsessive.
Oh, right. Well, as you know what guys like. At this stage, I have to say other yeast extract-based drinks are available, but I can't think of any that are. Bovril, does that count as?
No, Vegemite.
Oh, Vegemite, yeah. It might, yeah. Bovril's very into, but you know, Bovril stands for bovine vril.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a long story, but it's, I think it said somebody wrote a book about this life essence called vril, and somebody thought, I wonder if cows have vril, and they decided to come up with this drink called bovine vril. That's the gist. Anyway, you can
and that's the BAFTA.
And that's the bad gone. Yeah. I know that. I actually did a 5-minute routine in my last Edinburgh show about it, so I should remember it. A routine that's a lot funnier than I made that sound, I have to say. It's questions day, Kieran.
Indeed.
And if you can hear ice, by the way, it's because we're not recording as normal on Sunday morning. We are recording on Saturday night, so there is ice involved. And yes, it is in a glass of wine. So those of you thinking he started early, 9 o'clock in the morning, I've got a glass of wine, and next to that I've got a glass of clementine juice. Because my God, it's hot, Kieran, isn't it? It's so hot. Oh,
it should be on the news.
Now, our first question comes from Robert Elliott, and it's about an issue we've discussed a lot recently, which is catering. But I don't think Robert's emailed because of that, because you know our waiting list is so long. He would have said this way before we discussed it. But Robert says, I have a question regarding the catering at football stadium. My sons and I are season ticket holders at QPR, and we always eat and drink at the pub before we go into the ground. This is mainly to do with the poor quality beer options at the ground, the queues at the food kiosks, and the high costs. I assume these kiosks are outsourced to catering companies on a season or 2 season long contract, but can you explain more how these work and the costs involved? It's an interesting one, Kieran, because for the whole of last season, since we came back, everyone at Selhurst Park, season ticket holders, gets an email on the Friday saying, why not come to the ground at 1 o'clock and avoid those queues? And it's because our part of the ground, it's cramped, it's horrible. There's no room. Anybody who's been to the away end at Selhurst Park, that's where we are, just along from there. So that's the last place you want to be before the ground, before the game. Same at half time. It's a long time to get a drink. The quality is neither here nor there. And I think you expect quality, really. I know the lovely people at Piglet Pies providing top quality stuff, but you're not really there for the the quality. But it's an interesting question. Now, are they all outsourced? Are there some clubs doing the catering in-house?
The vast majority of clubs are doing it on an outsourcing basis because they've got enough things to manage without things going disastrously wrong on match day, and you've got somebody else to blame if things don't work out. As far as Robert's comment about the poor quality beer options, the problem is if you've got a match taking place once every 2 weeks, you've got to clear your beer lines at the end of every match because the beer will turn, what will go in the pipes. So it is actually quite expensive to provide beer at football grounds because of the way that the pipe systems work. And we had somebody on very early doors on the show talking about that, which was quite an eye opener. As far as the queues are concerned, it's a problem of supply and demand. You've got people wanting food in 45 minutes before the match starts, 10 to 15 minutes at half time, and depending on whether you've won or lost, perhaps afterwards as well. So there's these huge peaks in demand, and trying to get that right, especially if you take a club like Palace, who's got a ground which has been there for a long time, and the ground was not built with the idea of catering being a significant revenue source, was the case. If we look at Spurs are now bringing in £1 million a match from catering, but they had the new stadium built with the intention of relieving you of your wallet as much as they can, and the concourses are very wide. They've got this system in terms of supplying beer, which is quicker than at the other grounds, and so on. So you've really got to future-proof it if you're going to make money out of catering. The likes of Sodexo, as you said yourself, why bust a gut when people expect pretty low standards in respect of pies? Although when we had Joe from Piglets on, they initially were hoping to sell 2,500 pies a match, and due to the quality, they're now selling 10,000. So if you put something out there which is of high quality, people will eat it. I think there are a few clubs that are still of the view that people will only eat food, the catering at a football match, as a last resort or as a means of lining their stomach before a couple of swift ones, and I think that's perhaps counterproductive.
I think I still owe an apology to Jo from Piglet Pies. I understand she's only just emerged from the darkened room in which she had to have a lie down after I said that first thing I do when I get a pie is put a hole in it and squidge ketchup around it. It's generally upset. The problem is, Kieran, selling tea and coffee at football, it just drives everybody up the wall. You finally get to the front and some idiot asks for 8 cups of coffee and then starts asking whether they've got artisan coffee from Nicky. They shouldn't sell tea and coffee. Taste them. Anyway, John Lish has our next question. John Lish says, he says it's quite a cynical question, Kieran. He says it upsets.
Well, we're not cynics, though.
We're not cynics, so we wouldn't have recognised whether unless he told us, as he has, it's a cynical question, we simply wouldn't have known this was a simple question. Cynical question, indeed. It's not simple. It's definitely not simple. It is cynical. John Lish's cynical question is about transfer fees prompted by my club, Pompey, Portsmouth, selling, in inverted commas, Ellis Harrison to Fleetwood. Ellis was bought for a reported £450,000 from Ipswich Town in 2019 on a 3-year deal, amortisation 150k a year, and became one of the club's high earners. So after 2.5 years, says John, his book value should be $75,000. Pompey said they received a nominal fee from Fleetwood. Now, says John, as I am a cynical bar steward, and what an amazing coincidence that we have a question about bars and we've got a bar steward asking the next question. That's amazing, isn't it? As he's a cynical bar steward, I'm thinking that this isn't a cash positive situation for Portsmouth. As Ellis hasn't asked for a transfer, and it's likely he's moving to a lower value contract, my expectation is that Pompey are making some payments to smooth the transition and that the fee has some benefit in accounting terms rather than in cash. How much of my cynicism is justified, and how much is it just my bar steward nature? You might have to recap that one, Kieran, for people that drifted off halfway through.
Yes, and I do like the fact that this transfer took place in January, and then we were answering it in July, which I think is indicative of the big pile of questions. But we will get round to everyone somehow. We haven't worked quite out how we'll do it, but
as we're going to find out soon, Kieran, it seems that the best way of getting a question asked on this pod is to call yourself Larkin Hogle. I don't know what it is he's got on Guy, but he's got photographs or something, because he's got another question coming up later. But anyway, John Lish's cynical and full of detail question.
Yes. If we take a look at the position of Ellis Harrison, he was signed for a significant fee for a League One club, $450,000. He got 20 goals in 84 games, which at League One level is okay. 10 goals a season. You're perhaps hoping for a bit more, and I think he wouldn't have been offered a new contract or a new contract on particularly good terms at the end of his 3 years. So when Fleetwood came sniffing round and they offered him an 18-month contract, you can see the benefit here for the player. So in terms of Pompey, would they have paid him up for the remaining 6 months of his contract? I don't think so, simply because I've looked at the figures in terms of the wage bills for Fleetwood and Pompey. And Fleetwood's one of those clubs that fly underneath the radar, but they've lost 60 grand a week for the last 5 years. They rack up big losses. They're paying wages, 160 quid for every £100 that's coming through the door.
How much?
160.
Well, that's championship basket case level, isn't it?
That is basket case, yeah. I thought, we know that Pompey have got a big fan base, but Pompey's actually run on a fairly tight ship. So it could be that Fleetwood just gave a very small sum of money for the transfer. The player got an 18-month contract. Pompey got a player who hadn't been ripping up the trees off their wage bill, and everybody was happy. So I don't think there's anything to be cynical about. I think it's more due to the fact that perhaps the player hadn't delivered in terms of the expectations of the people that recruited him, and it was in the best interest of everybody for him to move on.
Do you think, Kieran, that it's partly our fault that some football fans are getting cynical, in that maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a team would sell a player and everyone would go, well, he's not been brilliant, so we're selling him. But now everyone is looking for a hidden reason. Now everyone assumes it's to do with FFP or impairment or whatever the words that we throw about. It does seem that fans are more cynical these days about moves. No one can just move from one club to another anymore, can they, without there being an ulterior reason?
Yeah. I don't think we can take credit for it. We've certainly not helped.
No,
but I think after the experiences of what we've seen at clubs like Bury and Macclesfield, and the ongoing problems at Rochdale, we were talking about Swindon last week, and so on. There is a lack of trust in football, I think, in respect of many fan groups and the people that own them. And I think that's reflective of a much broader issue in terms of a lack of trust on a societal level. But this is not a sociology podcast; it's a football finance one. But that degree of cynicism has come simply because the trust relationship has broken down.
I like your implication that one of the things we are more exciting than is sociology. I'll tell you one thing about that football finance pod. It's better than sociology. It's a very good point, Ken. And talking of transfers, I will be asking you on Thursday in our news pod how the bloody hell Barcelona can be affording Lewandowski when, after everything you've told me about their financial situation and the fact they've got about 9 world-class strikers in the book already. Our next question comes from Alex Carter. And Alex Carter says, I'm not a Bury fan, but I'm a Southport fan who lives in Bury and attends matches at Bury and Radcliffe occasionally. Alex, if you attend matches at Radcliffe occasionally, then that very tall, very handsome young goalkeeper, Tom Stewart, is my cousin. Obviously, like all football fans, says Alex, I've been pleased to see the progress being made with Bury coming out of administration and the return of football to gig leg. But one thing that would stick in my craw, though, would be if Steve Dale has made any money out of this. Quite a few people have asked us this, Kieran, over the last few weeks. Has he made any money from the club coming out of administration?
From what we have seen, I think the answer is no. I think Steve Dale tried to leverage on Bury's financial crisis, and he took an element of a gamble. It looks like he bought some of the debts owed to the club from another institution, which had gone into administration, to get some money out of that. That doesn't look like that's going to materialise. So, we're not fans of Steve Dale at all, but I don't think he has benefited financially from this. He's a traditional bottom dweller in the sense that he tries to acquire distressed assets and extract money from them. I think in terms of the way that the Bury Football Club issues exploded, and the club being expelled from the EFL, he probably didn't anticipate that, and he's probably cost him a bit of money as a result.
Now, here's that question from Larkin Hogel that I promised. As we've discussed before, we're still not convinced that Larkin Hogel isn't Guy or one of his family. I think putting two and two together, and the fact that Larkin's clearly in Australia, it probably isn't Guy, but there's some mysterious reason why Larkin's questions are getting nodded through. Nothing personal, Larkin. They're always good questions, but, not that we're cynical. And Larkin Hogel says, I once took an economics of sport class to fulfill some university requirements. No, you didn't, Larkin. You don't have to pretend. That's fine. Larkin says, my professor opened the course by telling us how we were all in the class only because sport was in the title. In brackets, Larkin says he was not wrong. Although I'm tempted to say, because he's in Australia, he wasn't wrong, mate. But is it appropriate to mention rugby? No, it's not appropriate to mention rugby on this, is it? But in larger economic terms, sport is not very impressive, said Larkin's teacher. For example, Walmart alone turns over more revenue than all the American sports leagues combined. Now, you discussed this before, Kieran, and it's normally journalists use things like the size of Wales to explain country, or the size of two red buses, and you always use Bet365.
You've seen my mind map, haven't you?
I know, yes, I have. You say Bet365 is worth more than the Premier League, and so on. But Larkin says, can you put the Premier League, the English football pyramid as a whole, and if you can muster an effort, says Larkin, which is a bit rich, considering every single question he puts, we answer. Football is a global sport in relation to other industries, individual companies, financially. The athletes earn a ton of money, obviously, but does a big football club help a town more than an industry with a large factory, for example, employing 10% of said town? Which is a good question.
Yeah, it's a fair question. How many other industries do you know that are open once a fortnight?
Yeah,
for 10 months of the year. Yeah, and this is going to answer the question. So I'd actually written down here the Premier League and the EFL combined generate just over £6 billion a year. Bet365 takes 10 times that amount of money in bets, in wagers. Now, Bet365's got relatively low margins. Yeah. If you compare it to Apple, for every £1 that's generated by the whole of English football, Apple generates 60, and that's a company with 3 products.
Yeah.
So and Apple makes profits of 109 billion. So again, that's 15 times. So I think Larkin's right in the sense that his professor was effectively saying what I think we have said on more than one occasion: football is a small industry with a big mouth and with an awful lot of attention. So I was on Twitter this morning, and we've got journalists, we've got UK journalists flying across to Australia to comment upon friendly matches taking place, and then turning up at the Manchester United's new kit is being brought out today. Well, yeah, to me, that's not essential journalism. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it will get an awful lot of likes. It will get an awful lot of debate. And I actually thought the kit looked got half decent as well. But that's a separate story. Not as good as the Bradford City chocolate and cream.
York City.
York City.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, in respect of Larkin's question, would a local football club generate more than a factory employing 10%? No. Football clubs are tiny. There will be in a. We went to Accrington. And we saw our friend Andy Holt, and Accrington turnover, 3 or 4 million pounds a year. There will be plenty of companies in Lancashire that will do a huge multiple of that, but they will go under the radar. If you want to make money and ensure that nobody knows about it, don't buy a football club. You can make money elsewhere.
That's what you've just talked about, Kieran, in relationship to Larkin's last sentence about a football club as a business in a town compared to other businesses who do more for the town. That's the stick that people who don't understand football, some of whom are MPs, use to beat people like us when we say that a football club should never be allowed to go to the wall. Because they will say, well, you don't have the same feelings about any other industry in that town or city, which is not true. But there is a germ of truth in that, Kieran, isn't there? We know the reason why we think a football club should never go to the wall, but in just purely financial and economic terms, it doesn't make a difference to a town as much as, say, a steelworks going out of business would do, would it?
You're absolutely right. I mean, but what I would say in defence of the football teams, and this was something, I hate to bring up the subject of Derby County, but if Derby County had gone out of business, then that city would have lost part of its identity on a global sphere, because the English football results are scrutinised. Derby County has been in the Premier League, and especially when it's hosting Chelsea or Manchester United or Liverpool or City or the big clubs around, it does generate a lot of attention. Not just locally, but in intangible ways, which are actually very difficult to put a true monetary value on. That doesn't stop management consultants from making up numbers left, right, and centre to justify their fees. But there is no doubt that a football club, first of all, it provides a sense of identity for the people and a sense of community and a sense of togetherness, which, again, are intangibles. But in terms of profile, it's good for the city or town as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't apologise for mentioning Derby, Kieran. I think it's best that we do mention them every now and then. It's like weaning people off tranquilisers. I don't think we can just suddenly not have Derby on, because that's too much. Going cold turkey straight away probably wouldn't help. Cam Gray has our next question. And Cam's question is this. Given the amount of money involved in football advertising set against the ever-growing volume of illegal streams, do either the broadcasters or advertisers take into account the audience number on dodgy feeds? From an advertiser's perspective, it's extra eyes for free, and for a broadcaster, it's potentially extra dosh for extra eyes on products in renting advertising space. An interesting one.
And a cynical one as well, I think.
Yeah.
So, but a fair question. Explicitly, the answer would be no. You cannot, as if you're trying to agree a going rate for a match which is being broadcast. You cannot say, well, we normally expect to get around 1.5 million people watching this on Sky, but according to a collective, I don't know what the collective noun is for Uncle Terry's, but according to all the Uncle Terry's that we know in the country, we reckon there's probably another 3 million people watching it on hooky streams. You try selling that to a blue chip company that's wanting to place adverts, and they're going to walk away. So I absolutely understand where Cam is coming from, and I think he does make a valid point. But in terms of selling eyeballs, you can only go with the appropriate number which the broadcasters show. Having said that, the likes of Sky and BT are very, very coy in terms of giving out the number of people who watch football live. And I think people would be surprised at how few people watch some matches. I mean, there can be, I know for some Premier League matches, I've heard the figures can be low as 250,000, which you think, oh, well, this is the Premier League, and Sky are paying £10 million a match for this. But we know, and if it was Brighton versus Burnley, or if it was Palace versus Bournemouth, or something like that, then there is a limited market. Some people will watch it because it's football and it's on live, but other people still need to be attracted to watch the matches.
What the thing with Sky is, Kieran, and indeed BT, that most people, apart from live sport, don't tend to watch Sky or BT. I worked on a show, Sky Sport, which one episode of which attracted 500,000 people, and it was champagne time, because that was considered a huge figure, and that's a figure that even on ITV2 or ITV3 would be considered a disastrous figure. And it's the same with BT. I mean, BT have got some brilliant documentaries, some brilliant sports documentaries.
Yes.
I'd be amazed if more than 100,000 people are watching them across every time they're broadcast. So it's. I mean, those figures you talk about for football are surprisingly low, but in the context of how many people watch Sky anyway, they're not. To be honest. I'm still trying to think of a collective name for Uncle Terry's. I started with a flyover of Uncle Terry's, but that didn't seem quite right somehow. A foundation of Uncle Terry's. Is crotch discomfort hurting your game? Fear no more. The kings of crotch comfort, Manscaped, have spent 2 years designing the most comfortable boxer briefs out there. Sleek, soft, comfortable, flexible. The brand new Boxers 2.0 from Manscaped take your little fellas to the royal ball throne. We think it's time you invest in your family jewels. So let your bulge breathe and get 20% off and free shipping with the code PriceOfFootball at manscaped.com. That's Price of Football in big letters for your little fellas at manscaped.com.
Absolutely. And the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 is the best electric trimmer for below-the-waist grooming. Their 4th generation trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce those grooming accidents that none of us want, thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. It's also waterproof, so you can use it in the shower, and it's got a 400K LED spotlight for a more precise shave, so you can check what you're cutting.
And we know for a fact that James Bond manscapes. So if you want to join the governor, get 20% off and free shipping with the code PriceOfFootball at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PriceOfFootball. Up your crotch game, because once the Boxers 2.0 touch your sack, you will never go back.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
What if passports were stamped with experiences instead of places? With Luxury Gold, each journey brings you unforgettable passport moments. In Japan, join a private sushi making class with a master chef and witness the cherry blossoms alongside a tree doctor. Experiences like these are the golden threads that make up your Luxury Gold journey. To learn more, contact your travel advisor or visit luxurygold.com/Japan.
Andrew Carruthers, I suspect maybe a Newcastle fan. Andrew Carruthers says, with the changes in sponsorship rules regarding related parties being used to seemingly curb Newcastle spending, brackets, but not Man City, Leicester, or other deals already in place, are there any rules regarding loans from national banks For example, could the Saudi National Bank lend Newcastle £500 million on a 50-year interest-free loan to circumvent not only sponsorship rules but FFP also?
It sounds. This is the most cynical show we've ever done.
I don't know. See, I don't know enough about football finances even now to know whether that's cynical or not, just Forrest Gump simplicity. Just going, what could they? I don't know.
Well, could the Saudi National Bank lend Newcastle £500 million? Well, the answer is no, because it goes against the principles of Islamic finance. So
right, okay.
there's a step, but if could another bank do it? Yes, they could. Could they do it interest free? Presumably, because they are connected to the government or the ruler of a country. Yes, that could be done. Does this give an FFP benefit? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't, and the reason for that is that if you borrow money, whilst you get £500 million in your bank account, it is not treated as revenue for FFP purposes. So it would automatically circumvent FFP because FFP is revenue less costs, and revenue comes from ticket sales, broadcast, and commercial revenues, plus your profits on player sales. So it's completely outside of the remit of FFP because ultimately it's a loan which has to be repaid rather than revenue which is generated from selling things, and it's revenue less cost which is the basis of your FFP calcs.
Our next question is about FFP, Kieran, and I understand what you're saying about cynicism, but I think it's difficult for our listeners to ask a question about FFP that isn't cynical.
Yeah.
I don't think there is an innocent, open question about FFP, and I think the one obsession, we know our fans are obsessed with kits, we know that they're interested in amortization, we know they're interested in agents, transfer fees, but the FFP regulations, profit and sustainability, whatever you call it, are the one thing that our listeners keep coming back to because we haven't got to the bottom of it. I don't think anybody has. It's a really difficult subject for us all to comprehend, and everyone's obsessed with the idea that there are ways around it. So Michael Dunn has this question about FFP. And Michael Dunn says, when David Beckham went to the MLS, I recall that as part of his contract, he was given the option to buy a franchise at a future date, which he then did with Inter Miami and made millions selling off a share of the team. Could a Premier League club offer something similar to get round FFP? For example, Newcastle seems to be the example du jour.
Yes.
If Newcastle wanted to buy Mbappe but keep his astronomical wages out of the FFP calculation, could they offer him an option to buy 10% of the club for a nominal amount? Or would the Premier League have a mechanism for including the value of this offer in their calculation? In US sports, it's fairly common for the biggest stars to become team owners at some point, which presumably is a trend we could see in football now that top players earn equivalent amounts over their career. Can you see that as a trend that might be coming along, Kieran?
I think not, because if we go back to a story we've covered on a couple of times, I remember Gareth Barry and Swindon Town. Where did he own part of the club or didn't he? It's never really been resolved because it looked as if the paperwork maintained by Swindon Town, and we covered this on a recent show, was sketchy, I think is the politest way of describing it. So I
think we should say there, Kieran, the previous owners of Swindon Town, not the current owners, just in case they're listening.
Yes, absolutely.
Lee Power. Yeah.
So you're not allowed to have an interest in two clubs. So the problem that would arise here is what happens if Kylian Mbappe went to Newcastle United, was given an option to buy 10% of the club. Now, that would actually be covered under something which was referred to as share-based payment, and therefore what you do is that you put the cash equivalent of that benefit in as a wage cost. So it wouldn't be able to circumvent FFP, but it would give the accountants, keep them quite giddy. But if Kylian Mbappe, let's say he signed for Newcastle in a year's time, signed a 4-year contract, and after 3 years he moved to Real Madrid, he would be at Real Madrid, but he would have an option to buy a share in Newcastle. That would fall foul of the you cannot have an interest in two clubs rule. So therefore, it wouldn't be successful. I also would suspect that if other clubs in the Premier League became suspicious that this might be the case, what they would do is, as we saw when the Newcastle deal by PIF was announced, they immediately started changing the rules to try to future-proof anything in respect of Newcastle. So I think there could be an emergency meeting, and all of a sudden, any share options in respect of deals would go off the scale, would go off the table. I don't think it could be done anyway under the general rules, but even if it could, there would be. I think there would be. A, you'd have to show it as a wage cost, and B, the Premier League would sort of do their whack-a-mole approach to everything in respect of Newcastle since the acquisition.
Now we're on our penultimate question already, Kieran, which is strange, considering we've got about a 2-year waiting list to get a question answered on the show, unless you're Larkin Hogan, of course. I can only assume that Guy went outside to fan himself with a handful of fivers and forgot to come in.
Fivers?
Sorry. Well,
careful.
Don't
insult, Guy.
No, fiver is lightweight summer money. Yeah, it's they're the lightest notes. It's just that's his summer. That's fivers is tipping money. And it comes from Trevor Godfrey. And we spoke recently about the fact that the Canadian men's team went on strike because they wanted parity with the women's team, which is a refreshing change. But Trevor Godfrey wants an update about a similar situation. Trevor Godfrey says, I remember reading about the US women's national team taking their bosses, US Soccer, to court over a pay disparity. Did that get resolved?
Yes, it has been resolved to the satisfaction of all concerned, as far as both sets of players are concerned. The issue between the US women's national team, who of course have been very successful at women's World Cups, and the men's teams who have, they qualify on a regular basis, and then they've made some progress in some tournaments. Was that the representatives of the women's team would say, well, hold on, you look at the viewing figures, they're absolutely fantastic. The men's team, they're not generating perhaps the same amount of interest because there's lower expectation. But why, under those circumstances, are the men's team getting higher bonuses? I think in terms of match fees, there has been broad parity for some time, but match fees don't tend to be particularly high for national teams. But what we do see is huge incentivization. So, if you get through the group stages, if you win the round of 16, if you win the quarterfinals, and those bonuses, by all accounts, were significantly higher for the men's team than the women's team. So why is that the case? Well, it's terrible thing to say. It comes down to money. FIFA pay $38 million in prize money for a side that does well, compared to $4 million for the women's competition. So that's partly due to the fact that, as far as the women's World Cup is concerned, the value of the broadcast rights and the value of the commercial deals that are struck by FIFA are lower, and FIFA's argument is, well, we've got less money coming in from the women's game compared to the men's game, so therefore we're going to give less money out as prize money, and therefore the national associations are saying, well, if we're generating less money in prize money from the women's competition, we've got to give them less money. So that's been the argument traditionally put forward by US Soccer. But the case now has been resolved, and going forwards, there is going to be parity, not only in terms of match fees, but also in terms of prize money. And you can see the rationale behind that, and I think it's that there is satisfaction on both sides here.
Our last question comes from Curtis Harley, which is one of the coolest names we've had for a while. If there's a 1950s film and Curtis Harley came along, you'd know he'd be a bad boy. He'd be a bad boy that the girl fell
with
for.
With a twinkle in his eye, though.
Oh, he'd have a twinkle in his eye and a guitar, obviously, but clearly. And Curtis Harley has a question about his club, Huddersfield Town. And Curtis says, on a recent pod, you mentioned that Marcus Evans was interested in purchasing shares in Huddersfield. It's been said by some of us that his motivation for investing this money is so it could be a tax write-off on his wealth. I'd love to know if this is common practice by wealthy individuals, and maybe a motivation for people like Mike Ashley to want to get back into football with Derby. Another cynical question, Kieran?
Another cynical
question?
Yeah. Perhaps it's the weather, but it can't be, because this question was probably written in January.
I imagine so. Yeah.
Okay, it's not the hot weather turning our listeners. Are there some tax benefits in buying into a loss-making business? Yes, there are, in the sense that you don't pay any tax because you're not making any money. But if you spend £30 million on a loss-making football club and it doesn't make any money, you don't pay any tax. Could you have done something more lucrative with that £30 million and made some profits and then paid tax on it? Yes, you could. So I personally don't see this as a driving factor. If you are a highly successful individual in your own industry, in your own right, and we know that Mike Ashley is a controversial figure. He's also a successful controversial figure in terms of his business, in terms of generating profits. You tend to think that you've got the Midas touch, and you can turn a company which is losing money into one which is making money. And in the case of Mike Ashley, he did that. Newcastle United made a profit of around about 30 to 40 million pounds if you take the 14 years in which he was involved with the club, and then of course he made further profits when he sold the club to PIF and Amanda Staveley and the Reuben brothers. So I think that's part of the reason these people buy the clubs. It's based on, they think that they can make money. Some of them do, most of them don't. In the case of Marcus Evans, he really got his fingers burned at Ipswich. Ipswich were losing probably £8 or £9 million a year on a regular basis, as far as his period of ownership was concerned. Can he transfer those losses to Huddersfield? Probably not, because Huddersfield's losing money as well. So I don't believe that the tax system operates as a driver of interest by wealthy people in football clubs. We go back to what I believe to be the four reasons, which is profit, vanity, insanity, and love. Mike Ashley did it for profitable reasons. Marcus Evans, perhaps that was his motivation. Perhaps he feels he's learnt lessons from his experience at Ipswich, and perhaps he could replicate that at Huddersfield. We don't know. I think he's a gentleman that enjoys his privacy. It could be that we know that football is addictive as fans. Well, it could also be addictive if you're an owner. It just because of the profile it gives to you, the decision making that you're involved with, the nature and the sort of the fame of the people that you're involved with. That's a fairly seductive mix.
And I mean, Ipswich Town are a case of a family who for about 30 years owned Ipswich, who probably did do it for love, didn't they? Was it the Cobbold family, wasn't it?
It was the Cobbold family, yeah.
And just in terms of tax, Kieran, I presume Mike Ashley would be paying some fairly hefty tax on the profit he made from selling Newcastle, would he?
Potentially, yes, but as I always say to people, if you want to pay less tax, be less successful.
Right.
Yeah, that's so that will he be able to roll over the profits into something else? Possibly. But I think the tax authorities are taking a stronger line in respect of things like this.
Into something else, you mean something else within his Sports Direct?
Something else within football, probably.
Okay. Well, right.
The rules do change on quite a regular basis.
So, sorry, Kieran, does that imply then that he could make, whatever it is, say as a figure plucked out the £50 million profit selling Newcastle, but then say to the tax people, well, I'm going to buy Derby with that and I'm going to blow that profit, so I'm not going to pay tax. Is that how it works?
There is something called rollover relief.
Wow. Is it?
Which
that's
yes.
Fiddler's favourite, I believe, is it not?
I think it's a favourite of some other of our friends. We'd rather not talk about. but where effectively the profits from one business you can reinvest into another business. But when you ultimately sell your final business, you pay tax on everything.
Oh, okay. So they do keep a tab on it then. So
Absolutely.
I'm relieved about that. Thank you to everybody who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. Although when you hear the news we have for you next week, you might make a slightly bigger monthly contribution to the pod, or you may tell us to bugger off. But we'll see. But we have finally come up with some kind of benefit for our loyal patrons. Of course, if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com or ask Larkin Hogle for the special address that he uses. He's obviously got some kind of speeding. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, as Kevin said, thank you all so much for all the support. And we're also in a position to now confirm that we will be taking the show live to Plymouth Argyle on September the 27th. Plymouth have put this out on their website and a photograph of myself and Kevin when we were looking a lot younger. But
we were a lot younger. we were
possibly.
We were 2.5 years younger, and we hadn't gone through a 2-year pandemic since.
And we weren't cynics in those days.
We weren't. It's funny that, isn't it? They were with the cheery smile of two non-cynical people.
But there's other ways in which you can support the show, and one of those is to go onto your podcast app and leave us a review. We don't understand how this works, but it boosts us in the charts. It boosts us via the algorithms. Whenever Producer Guy tries to explain something technical to myself and Kevin, we're good at nodding, but we're not too good on the understanding things. But we just follow instructions. It doesn't matter what you say. Yeah, perhaps you'd like a slightly more surreal Price of Football show. And if that was the case, what could be better than saying you'd rather have the show presented by former leader of the Teardrop Explodes, but also Druid Julian Cope with Lawrence Bassini. Can you imagine the conversation, how the words would flow if that show went live? I'd pay for it. I'd be straight onto Patreon to get the benefits of anything involving those two.
Lawrence Bassini would ask him for a fight. He'd offer £1 million to fight him and Simon Jordan in there. Julian Cope is. I very rarely use the word extraordinary about people, but yeah, he's one of those people you're not entirely sure whether he's taking the piss or not. But he's a genuinely really fascinating man. But it tells you the sort of fact that you go to Google and it turns out you can't Google the sort of things he's told you. Because they're about mysterious forces beyond our control. Fascinating chat. I used to love Teardrop Explodes.
Yes.
I'd much rather talked about Julian Cope and Lawrence Bassini, but unfortunately Julian Cope's not playing on buying a football team. That would be a roller coaster ride if he was.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.